Hi buddy, welcome back. I'm the Strategy Professor, and today we're going to be talking about the 8.15 mid-tier list. You can find timestamps in the description if you don't have time to watch the whole video. You can also find a link to this Google Doc in the description as well if you want to read along. As far as my tier list go, if you're new to the channel, Tier 1 is what I think are always the top 5 champions, and Tier 2 are the next 10 champions. So even if Ekko isn't really that far behind some of these other champs on the tier list, that's just how I cut it off, just to make it really easy and legible. I know there are some tier lists out there where they'll put like 10 champions in S tier and, you know, like 20 champions in Tier 2. I don't think that's really helpful for figuring out like what you should be playing if you want to be playing the most optimal pick. So I try to narrow it down to make it pretty reasonable. Now, I will say that mid is probably the most balanced role of all the roles right now. I think there are a ton of really viable picks out there. This is almost always true of mid lane. It's always been very versatile. So if your champion's not on the tier list, it's probably still playable for the most part if you get good and your experience on the champion. But I do think that the champions I'm going to talk about are particularly good in solo queue if you have practice on them and know how to play them. Now, for each one of these entries, I also have a little mini Google Doc, which you can find. And I'm going to link to the Wikia, which works sometimes for stats. The last couple of weeks, it's been a little squirrely, but we'll see if those work. That can be very helpful. A quick little rating system, 1 to 5, 1 being one of the weaker champions at the given role, 5 being one of the stronger champions at the given role. Then I have a couple of categories here. One is lane pressure, like how well can they push and really dictate the pace of the lane. How well can they control the waves and harass the enemy. Kill threat is how likely are they to be able to get a kill in the lane. Safety is how well can they survive ganks, how well can they position and, you know, do what they want to do later on in a safe way as the game progresses. So do they have mobility? Do they have some kind of survivability built into their kit? Scaling is how well does the champion perform as the game progresses. Some champions are way better at this than others due to their itemization or due to the ratios in their kit or the utility that they provide. I have an entire video on scaling. If you're not sure about that concept, be sure to check out the main channel, The Strategy Professor on YouTube. Just look up scaling in the little search box, and it should take you right to that guide. And then reliability. So how likely is this champion to perform at an optimal level, right? So some of this comes down to execution. How hard is a champion to play? You know, how intense are the mechanics? But it's also how easy is it to counter the champion? Are there lots of champions that are really good against this champion that are popular in the meta right now? So it's kind of a two-way street. But overall, just how likely is the champion, how likely are you to be able to use this champion to perform at an optimal level over several games? Okay, and then I have standard runes and recommended items. And we'll talk a little bit about this. A lot of champions have multiple builds and multiple runes they could go. And so we'll talk about some of the different options, but this is just kind of the generic cookie cutter. If you're not sure what to get, that's pretty good to default to. Okay, if you want to check out the other tier list videos, I have already done the support tier list video for this patch. I have that linked for you in the Google Doc. I have the 80 carry tier list linked as well. And then I also have the in-depth patch notes that I did for patch 8.15. And then if you're new to the channel and you just kind of want to know, like, well, what are the greatest hits that I can offer as far as, like, what are the best tips to help you gain a lot of elo? I just did a guide about a week and a half ago, 5 tips, and that sort of combines it all, including lane management, vision, macro control, shot calling, lots of good stuff in there. It's all broken up with timestamps in a Google Doc, just like all of my guides are, so be sure to check that out. And as always, I just like to remind people that this is intended for a plat-minus audience. This is not for professional play or challengers. It's going to be slightly different just because the level of organization, communication, and expertise with the game are different. So, you know, something like Orianna might be at the very top tier in professional play just because it's a very safe blind pick and is really good with organized play and practice, whereas she's still pretty good in solo queue, but it's going to go down just a little bit relative to other champions that can snowball much harder than her. Then also take into account reliability. So, you know, to some extent, how difficult is the champion to play? Champions that are really hard to play, like Ryze, are going to be down a little bit more than they would be at pro-level play, where people are going to be proficient on that champion. And then, you know, I take the meta into account as well. So, you know, what's good relative to other picks right now, relative to what you're going to encounter out there playing in solo queue. And I really heavily weight sort of the potential of a champion and not just the statistics. Statistics do matter, and we'll talk about that. but I also think about, okay, is there something that people are missing with the statistics? Maybe they're not itemizing correctly or building correctly. A lot of times stats are pretty accurate, but sometimes there can be some stuff that is overrepresented or underrepresented in the stats. So we'll talk about that where applicable. And if you like this video, don't forget, like and subscribe. If you've watched a lot of other content on the channel, especially, you know, you've watched 5, 6, 7 videos and you really enjoy the content, don't forget to subscribe. It really does help other people find the channel. It lets them know that we have quality content here. And if you are already a subscriber, don't forget to hit that like button. Likewise, it tells YouTube we have quality content and my guides are more likely to show up on searches and things like that. Okay, so let's go ahead and get in here. I think that Fizz is kind of #1 on the roost right now. A lot of people are sleeping on this champion. I actually have not even played against a Fizz all week, I don't think. And he hasn't been banned that much. So I think Fizz, for some reason, the all caps people are just not out in droves on Fizz. I thought they would be. Maybe they are. But people just aren't playing this champ. And historically, he's been pretty popular. I think his win rate's not that bad. But I think, yeah, I mean, he's at 54%. I guess maybe I just haven't played against him because it says he has almost a 9% play rate, which is really high. Pretty high. I mean, not crazy, but yeah, I mean, what is that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7th most played champ. So people are slowly starting to figure him out again. I mean, his numbers are just wacky right now. I don't know if it's going to let us get to... Let me close some of this stuff. I had to write new... guides because I haven't done a tier list guide in a really long time for mid lane, so I had to go do all the research and write up all these little mini guides from scratch, whereas usually I have a nice base to build on and then I just tinker with it. Yeah, it's not going to give us his numbers, but on the patch notes it's just crazy. Like his point blank fish is back to a 0.9 ratio. His W was like well over a 1.0 ratio. He's just basically back into one-shot territory, and a lot of the really popular a lot of the really popular builds out there that have developed make it a lot easier to lane with Fizz, because historically you have been able to punish him in lane really hard. But now, kind of with the advent of this Corrupting Potion, Time Warp Tonic build, which you're going to see on a lot of champs we're going to mention, he can kind of coast through the laning phase. As you can see, he's not as great sort of at the top end. There's not a very big sample size for this. Pro builds usually draws on Challenger and pro level players playing in solo queue, but Assassins in general are going to be much worse as you go up in solo queue because they typically rely a lot more on Snowball and near the top end of the ladder. They're just going to know how to work around it better. They're going to have better communication. People are just going to die less in general. They're going to bring a lot more crowd control, which obviously deals with Assassins well. So Fizz is going to be a lot better at kind of your gold, platinum, silver type of elo, where people may not be as prepared to deal with his snowball. But like, Bjergsen's probably going to build a similar here. Yeah, I mean, this is pretty much it. You can go Ravenous Hunter, Time Warp Tonic, Biscuit, and then you start with Corrupting Potion, and then go into Dark Seal, and that'll get you through most laning phases. The Corrupting Potion, of course, heals you. That has a really good combo with Time Warp Tonic. Time Warp Tonic also works with Biscuits. Gives you the mana, it helps you last hit under tower a lot of times, and then Dark Seal gives you 25% extra from potions as well. And this allows you some really nice trading in lane also. And then the Ravenous Hunter gives you additional healing. So you still get all of the spike damage with Electrocute and Sudden Impact, but you also get kind of this triple healing, which combines really well with these two items. That's going to be a very popular combination, especially on champions that don't typically do very well in the laning phase. Now, next patch, they are talking about potentially nerfing Electrocute and Sudden Impact, so we'll see how that impacts Fizz. They were talking about maybe hot fixing him. I didn't see that go through. They said if they were going to do it, it would have been today on Monday. But they haven't fixed him yet. So I think he's super strong right now, and he's very good against a lot of these other types of assassins because of the way he engages. He pops up on that trident, and he's untargetable. And then if he lands on you, you're basically dead because he's going to fish you in the face and then get an auto attack reset with the W, and you're dead. So he has a pretty low cooldown ult. I think it's less than 2 minutes. Pretty good itemization. You know, he can get a Proto Belt Lichbane early, which is a really nice, like, single target damage power spike. So his laning is really bad, but once you get out of the lane, he's so mobile, and he just one-shots people so well. that he's very difficult to stop once he gets rolling. So I think he's really good, particularly because not only does he have a dash, but he can go untargetable, which really helps you out in a lot of matchups, dodging a lot of other things. So I think that Fizz is #1 right now. You know, his win rate jumped a lot with these buffs. So I thought he was already pretty good before the buffs. Like, it was definitely a nerf to him the patch before, and I talked about that in the patch notes. Freak was saying it was a big buff, and I said it was a nerf, but now it's definitely a buff. Really, really big buff. So I think Fizz is great. Now, once again, those nerfs, if you're picking him up right now, those nerfs next patch to electrocute and sudden impact may impact him negatively, and if tanks start coming back into the fold, he has a hard time against tanks. But right now, especially against other squishies, and there's a lot of them out there, then Fizz is going to be really good. Okay, Talon is another champ, still really good. It's been this way for several patches. He did get a slap on the wrist. I don't even remember what they nerfed about it. I think his W, when it comes back in, does a little bit less damage, but his ratios are still just tremendous. Looks like it may not give us much info. We might get a couple of them today, but pretty much like his ratios are just too high. Like on his ultimate, I think it's well north of a 1.0 like bonus AD ratio. His passive's like a 1.0 ratio. You guys know Talon. You played against him. You know, he's one of the few assassins that actually has pretty decent wave clear with his W early on, and he can roam really well because he jumps over the walls, of course, and he has a really low cooldown ult that's basically a one-shot if he gets on people. So that's a really good combination. Push and roam, one-shot potential, great wave clear. That is pretty rare because they keep nerfing a lot of the champions that have great wave clear plus roam. They've nerfed them a lot. So like Taliyah, I'm trying to think of the other offenders that they've nerfed their wave clear over time. I mean, it was mostly Taliyah, but they've done it with some other champions as well. So he's super good. He can also use that ult to double as an escape. If he gets in really bad trouble, he can get out with the ult, but he is very, very strong now. He doesn't have any utility, so if you don't snowball very well, then it's not going to be good, but just his combination of mobility and just huge single target damage is really massive. You know, he's not going to perform that well against tanks. Once again, if they have a lot of armor, it's going to be rough, but overall, he has kind of problems against champions like Rakan as well, people that can CC him, like chain CC him and destroy him. But overall, he is pretty good. And his combo is so fast, like it's so much faster than something like a Zed, then you have a lot less time to react and a lot less counterplay. Like, he can delete people before they're even able to use their hourglass a lot of the time. And if they do hourglass, he can just stand there and kill them after the hourglass finishes. So, very, very strong champion. He's going to run the standard electrocute, sudden impact. Ghost Poro is going to help you get a little bit of extra AD in lane, give you a little bit of extra vision. Ulti Hunter's really nice. You get more ultimates. It's pretty much a kill every time it's up. It's great. Now, Nimbus Cloak is really great with his ult and Celerity as a combo because it's going to give you just that ton of movement speed, so you can wait that second and a half and then throw the blades on him, and you're going to get all of that extra AD. This is going to sync up really well, particularly with sudden impact and all that lethality that you have. So, and he has such great bonus AD ratios that the huge amount you're going to get off of Nimbus Cloak and Celerity is great. Now, next patch, they are nerfing the AD and the AP that you get off of Celerity because of interactions like this between Nimbus Cloak and Celerity. I think he gets some bonus movement speed off of his ult naturally anyways. So, yeah, it's just disgusting. He one-shots, he roams really well, he has good wave clear. He's still great. The items are a little strange. A lot of people get Tiamat early just to help you out with wave clear even more, and then they'll go into Dustblade, Ghostblade, and they typically don't even turn Tiamat into anything useful. They just use it strictly to improve his wave clear even more. So he is an assassin where sort of at the top level, he does have a really high win rate, and, you know, kind of at the mid-tier level, the peasant level here, he still is really good as well. So really strong, all-around assassin. And as you can see here, pretty much everybody goes that build. So it's pretty standardized. There's not a lot of variation to it. And almost everybody will start with this Tiamat. It's just Tiamat, Dustblade, Ghostblade typically. And then you just end the game before it goes much further than that. So yeah, very strong champ. Just be careful if you're overloaded on AD. So if you have like a top lane Darius and like a jungle Kindred or something, you might need to be a little careful and consider an AP champ mid so they don't all stack armor. But other than that, he's going to be great. Okay, so Zoe, and these are kind of like moderates. Like, I don't think Talon's that hard to play. Fizz is relatively easy to play. I mean, you do have to... You don't even really have to hit your fish distance anymore, because the way they changed the AP ratio, you can go back to land on them with your E and just hit them in the face with your lowest tier fish and still one-shot them, I think. So that took a lot of the skill expression out of Fizz. I think Fizz and Talon are both, as far as assassins go, pretty straightforward, pretty easy to play. Zoe is a bit more challenging to play. His champion is a menace. I mean, in pro play, she's obviously really good, but even in solo queue... okay, we actually get Zoe, so we get some numbers on Zoe here. They have nerfed her, like, numerous times, but it really just doesn't matter. She does too much damage. She has too much utility, too much damage, too much, like, threat. You know, she can hit you over walls, either with her bubble, or sometimes just a blind, like, Q, and kill you. I mean, this Paddle Star... does up to, what is this, based on level, plus, you know, whatever, 375, plus 150% AP based on distance. Like, it just does way too much damage and costs too little mana, and you can just spam this late game. Especially once she gets looted. Another thing is that, like, Spell Thief has no cooldown on it. So in a team fight where everybody's throwing their summoners on the ground, she can just run in circles and just spam this stuff. And just do a ton of damage. I mean, they nerfed it. It used to do 255. Now it only does 195, but that's still a lot of damage for something that doesn't have a cooldown, and you get the benefit of whatever it is, whether it's usually like flashes and ignites, which are obviously going to be really impactful in a fight, and then she still gets somewhere around 70%, and the bonus movement speed lasts for a long time. So this is still just like insanely good. Trouble Bubble is very nice, lots of extra damage. And then, of course, she just gets to, like, jump in and try to hit you with bubbles or Qs or whatever with her portal jump. So she just has so many different one-shot mechanics and zoning things with this, and it's just, like, disgusting. Just once she picks up those Spell Thief things, she gets Spell Thief stuff just off of random drops on minions. So if you just get a Redemption or an Ignite or whatever, you're pretty much going to win the fight mid lane. She's just such a menace, and they haven't fixed this interaction with... Hex Flash, which is what everybody goes on her, so you can just spam Hex Flash, and that counts as using a summoner spell, and then that allows you to get this extra, whatever, you know, 70% movement speed for 3 seconds, anytime you want, just by pressing D, or whatever your flash button's on, D or F, just so that you get the extra 3 movement speed. I mean, you don't even have to channel it. It's like, boom, press it, cancel it, 3 seconds, 70% move speed. So just like a permanent ghost. If she wants it. I mean, there's just so many things that are exploitable about this champion. She's just really, really gross. I mean, in pro play, she's probably number 1. I just have her a little bit lower because she does take a bit more skill than Fizz and Talon. But she's also a lot more relevant even if she falls behind. Because late game, even if she's behind an item, she can still one-shot you with Qs or bubbles. So, it's very, very good. So if you want a champion... Now, the thing is... If you're thinking of learning her, if you haven't played her yet, people hate this champion. She's one of the most hated champions in League of Legends. Pro players complain about her constantly. Just all sorts of high-elo people complain about her. It just really feels bad because she just has so many different one-shot mechanics, and it just feels like there's not much counterplay to her. And I know there's going to be somebody that'll be like, but wait a minute, she's not that strong. You can do this or that to her. I'm telling you, that is not the common consensus. And it's important to recognize that because she's probably going to get nerfed. Again, they're just going to nerf her until she's out of the game. Pretty much. Like, she feels kind of like... What's a good analogy for this? Like Ivern, sort of. Where, like, when Ivern was really good, people just hated that champ so much. I'm trying to think of, like, something else. Like, Ryze and Cassio and Azir are all champs, but they were never really that great in solo queue. I don't know. She's just, like, one of the most feels-bad champs for the enemy, like, possible. I mean, Yasuo might be another one that people really, really hate, but both of those are made by Certainly T. Like, they're both fun to play, but they're really bad to play against. So anyways, just run Electrocute, Sudden Impact, Ghost Portal, Ravenous Hunter. I don't think they fixed the Hex Flash. I mean, let me look. I thought that was like everybody runs Hex Flash on her. It's very popular. Let's see. Maybe they did fix that interaction. I could have sworn they didn't. But maybe they did in one of those patch notes that I'm just not remembering. Yeah, because nobody's running it. I'm kind of curious now. Yeah, no, not a single person's running it. Okay, maybe they did fix that interaction. Either way, it's still really good. Let me just type this in here. Okay, anyways, I'm not going to look it up. I assume they fixed it because nobody's running it, and it was, like, super abusive. So maybe they fixed it. It was, like, a bug fix or something like that that I just overlooked, like, either in the last few patch notes or something, but... Still going to be strong. Doesn't change that much about her playstyle. Okay, so Sork Boots, and then just Luda and Morello Zanyas. This just gives you, like, the mana that you need. This gives nice burst damage, good smooth power curve with Morello's. And then Zanya's just gives you a bit more ability to navigate some of the skill shots that are going to be flying at you. So yeah, very strong. Definitely pick her up if you want to get some wins. If you want to learn her, just understand that she's probably going to get the axe here in the next few patches, I would guess. Okay, Aurelian Soul. Now, this is kind of a boutique champion. He's almost always 54-55%. Now, he is a great one, I think, to one-trick. He's one of the better one-trick champions because he does have that push and roam playstyle, and that is what wins solo queue a lot of the time. And he's one of the few champions that hasn't been touched. He also doesn't rely on Electrocute or Sudden Impact, and both of those are going to get nerfed pretty hard. So when those get nerfed out in the next patch or two, Aurelian Soul is going to be a huge winner because he's already has a really high win rate, 55%, just not a high play rate. And the game, like when the game slows down a little bit, he's also going to be stronger because he requires Rod of the Ages, so he has to charge up a little bit with that. So I think if you really want to invest in a one-trick champion for the rest of the season, I think Soul would be the one. Great wave clear. He can play pretty safe. He gets pretty tanky, so he's difficult to assassinate because he's going to get Rod of the Ages and Ryze. And the runes that he's going to run are going to be Phase Rush, Nimbus Cloak, Celerity, and Water Walking. Now, they are probably going to nerf the AP on Celerity, but that's probably okay. I think he can get some other stuff and be fine. And then he is a nice abuser of Biscuit and Time Warp Tonic. Time Warp's particularly good on him because it allows him to rotate faster when he's doing his Comet of Legend or whatever it's called. Yeah, Comet of Legend. So that's really nice, especially if you do it down the river. Then you get benefit from Water Walking and Time Warp Tonic. So that's pretty nice. And then nice low cooldown ult, decent damage, not insane. But he's just a really good zone of control mage. Like, he can land the stun, which is pretty decent. And then these spheres end up doing quite a bit of damage over time. So, I think he's great. He does take a lot of practice. He's really weird, but he pushes, he roams. Pretty good utility as far as, like, he can slow people with Ryze and make it very difficult to escape him or to get on top of him. He has a stun. He has a knockback. So, really good at disengaging if people are trying to dive your team. So, I think he's good. He's a good, solid champ. Nice build path, full of items that probably are not going to get nerfed. You know, Rod of the Ages is in a good position. Ryze has just recently been buffed. And Morello's pretty solid, too. So, none of these items are on sort of the chopping block, I think. And none of his runes are on the chopping block, either. So, as other mids get nerfed over the next few patches, especially Assassins, then you might see him come in. I'm not sure about his tank matchup. I assume he's probably pretty good, but his damage might be a little slow versus some of the super tanks. But once again, he does have that utility of being able to kite really well, with Ryze. Kite for your whole team, too. I mean, he creates this entire zone of control off of Ryze and with his R. So even if he doesn't do the maximum amount of damage, if you have like a Jinx or a Vayne or something like that that does really high damage to tanks, then, you know, he can be a really good role player in that situation. So I think that he has a lot of versatility to him. I think that he has a lot of utility. So he's an awesome pick. Probably the best one trick right now, I think. Because he gets virtually no pro play. There are some specialists that run him. He gets very little attention, but he consistently has a really high win rate, and just his playstyle in solo queue of the push and roam is going to be super strong. So he's my sleeper. He's the biggest sleeper on the patch, and he almost always is. He's very good, especially since they're nerfing everyone around him and buffing a lot of the stuff that he's really good with. Like, they buffed Phase Rush several times with him. So yeah, I think he's the sleeper resident, really strong champ that not many people are going to play. And that's really hard to find those champs. Because usually if something's really good, people figure out about it and everyone starts playing it. But for some reason, Soul has never really caught on. I don't think he's that hard to play. He's just weird. You just have to get used to him. Okay, other one, Twisted Fate. Now, this is the other push and roam champ that I think is really strong. So Twisted Fate has always been very good in solo queue. I mean, this is the pet champion of Apto, who is the greatest solo queue player in the world from Korea. He regularly gets to #1 all the time. And the way that he does it is with Twisted Fate. And the thing behind push and roam, and why that playstyle is so good in solo queue, is because it makes sure that all of your lanes win. It's not good enough to just win your lane, to have some kind of fighter champ, you know, ribbon top or whatever, and just go 5-0 in your lane. That's all well and good. But what are you going to do about your bot lane that went 0-5? Right? You can sit there and you can complain about it, like, oh my god, my bot lane always sucks, or whatever. But the real players that climb super fast, that are like boosters, they play champions that can win all of the lanes. Not just their lane, but every lane. Like, you make it impossible for your bot lane to lose. You make it impossible for your top lane to lose. Because you not only smash your lane, you take that advantage to other lanes. And that's why champions like Twisted Fate are so good at this. He's just a perfect, well-rounded mid laner. And in my one-trick video, I mentioned him and Taliyah as the two best one-tricks over time that you would want to be able to play. Now, Taliyah has gotten a lot of attention, primarily for her jungling, and she is still very good. We'll talk about her in a second. But I think Twisted Fate flies under the radar a lot. And his itemization is a little bit different, and like his runes, he doesn't really rely on any specific items or runes. He's very versatile. Because he pushes, he has his ult to roam, and then also he has that gold card, which is a nice point-click, you know, 2-second stun when you max it out. So that makes it very easy to gank for Twisted Fate early, or really at any point in the game. He takes towers really quickly with Lich Bane and just the interaction between like his cards and the towers. And they just recently, I don't know, it was like 6 patches ago, they increased like how much damage AP champions do to towers. So he's great. Now, he doesn't take dragons and barons very quickly, but he is really, really good over time. He has nice threat with his gold card in lane. Just go watch some Apto videos, APDO, if you want. Midbeast does a lot of commentary. Midbeast is a challenger level player in Oceania, I believe, and he does like some commentary on Apto. I think LS, who's another commentator, talks about Apto sometimes. But just watch some of those videos if you want to learn Twisted Fate, and you can see why he's so strong. And you might say, well, why don't more people pick him in pro play then? I'm honestly not that sure. I'm not like a mid lane specialist. I primarily specialize in support, but I do follow and study and try to figure out, you know, other roles. But I couldn't really answer that. I guess maybe it just takes too long for him to roam, or maybe he has some bad matchups. Like, he's not amazing against tanks, but in solo queue where it's very disorganized, you can definitely take advantage of him. I think maybe it's just that champions like Ryze, Galio, and Taliyah just do a little bit more than he does as far as like highly organized team play. But I think that in solo queue, he's one of the best do-it-yourself champs. So very strong. He doesn't have a certain like rune that's super good on him. A lot of people just go Comet. Unsealed Spellbook was good on him for a little bit. It might still be good, but I really haven't seen anyone experiment with that lately. But you really want to go just Comet, Mana Flow, Absolute Focus, and Scorch, so you can kind of harass people out early with your cards and your autos. And then Dematerializer and Perfect Timing, so that you get that stopwatch in the landing phase. And then just Ionians, and almost everybody goes Rod of the Ages, Lichbane, Spellbinder. Just a couple of move speed boots, give you some nice spike damage, help you take towers quickly. And then Rod of the Ages just gives you that extra little bit of survivability against assassins, just all around good stats. So yeah, Twisted Fate, going to be a great choice for solo queue. Another one that I have seen moving up quite a bit lately is Ekko. Now, I've played against several good Ekkos, and I think this guy flies under the radar quite a bit. Where do they have him on here? He's not super far under the radar. He's creeping up to about 53%. And he's definitely garnering some attention. But this champion, he is kind of hard to play at a super top level. But, like, his numbers are just bonkers if you look at this dude. So, like, if you trigger his passive, you get 3 basic attacks or abilities, which is basically cast a Q on somebody, you know, jump on them with your E, and then auto-attack them again. It's very easy to trigger. That's going to trigger Electrocute. It's going to trigger this thing, which has a 0.8 ratio. So, like, the base damage is not that high, but 0.8 is insanely high as far as the damage goes. And you get some extra movement speed, which lets you stick to them or dodge skill shots or whatever you're trying to do. His Q itself has a 0.9 on it with 260. His parallel convergence has a 1.5 for a shield. So basically what that means, if you have 200 AP, that's an extra 300 shield. So he just gets an insanely high shield off of that. And stuns people for like 1.75 seconds. Then his ult is on a really low cooldown. It basically heals you up to full health. That's just a lot of math there, but that's pretty much what it does. You know, if you use this and you're like 20%, 30% health, something like that, it's going to be full health. And then just does an insane amount of damage. 150 ratio, once again. So that's going to be, if you have 200 AP, 750 base damage. So he does insane burst. He has really nice defense. So he's very good against other assassins. So he's excellent against champions like Fizz, particular, because they're going to do their damage. You just chrono break all that damage back, or against like a Zed, or even against a Talon or whatever. If they don't kill you all the way 100-0, you heal all of it back, and then you can turn it around and kill him. Now, he doesn't have like a point-click CC or point-click they're dead type of ability. You have to set up the parallel convergence for the stun. You know, you have to actually hit your Q, and so he's a little bit harder to play than other champs, but he's particularly good against other assassins, and if you're really good on him, he is definitely a champion that can, you know, 1v5 the enemy team. Although I don't recommend that. If he's really fed, he can definitely do that and catch people off guard. Like, I just played a game earlier tonight where an Ekko chrono broke and people weren't paying attention to where his little shadow was, and he just did like 80% of the health off of 4 people on our team, and they just crushed us. We were winning the fight, and they were running away, and just out of nowhere it was like quadra kill. So he's very, very strong right now. And you just want to run the standard suite of Electrocute, Sudden Impact, Eyeball Collection, Ulti Hunter. It gives you more ults. And then to help you get through a tough landing phase, especially if you're against a ranged opponent, you can just go Biscuit, Time Warp, Tonic, and then start with Corrupting Potion, and then go towards the that ring that gives you the extra sustain as well. So yeah, Ekko, really good choice. I don't quite have him in tier 1 because he is kind of difficult to play. His roam game is not that great. It's okay. He does push all right, but he doesn't have any other mobility thing like Aurelian Soul or Twisted Fate to get around. And he is kind of short range, so he doesn't have like the as much of a sphere of influence as Zoe does. But he's still very, very strong. Okay, Taliyah. Now she's primarily getting played in the jungle right now, but I still think she's a great mid laner. Looks like we're not going to get the numbers on her, but they did nerf her quite a bit, and then they buffed her. They can't really decide what they want to do with her. She's difficult to balance, but I still think she has pretty good wave clear. From what I can tell, she still has nice AP ratio. She, you know, if she gets a couple of items and she hits you with that knockback, you're basically dead. Her ult does have a longer cooldown, though. But it's still very similar. Nice push, potential all-in, like good utility, good zone control with her rocks, just her E and her W. Just really good zones of control and fighting, like pretty good poke, good wave clear, good roam, good burst. So yeah, I mean, she's one of the most played champions right now at the top end, almost 1,800 games played recently, which is insane, and a 58% win rate. So very, very good. Now, like I said, you see a lot of smites there. She's very good in jungle. Be sure to check out my jungle tier list if you want to see more on that. But you do see a couple of mid lane picks creeping up every now and then. If we look at picks of the week, she's not picked a ton. Now, this is in pro play, but she went like 50-50 on the week, so I think she is pretty good. And in solo queue, she's still gonna be a force. Now, there aren't amazing runes on her. I think that Ahri, Mana Flow, Celerity Scorch, and then Dematerializer and Time Warp Tonic are probably the best. But as you can see, there's not really a consensus here. I guess a lot of people, maybe I should switch it over to Electrocute. It looks like a lot of people actually have switched to, well, no. Because, like, the Electrocute is for the Smite people, so that's for jungle Taliyah. That's why it looks like it's all Electrocute. But if you look at the lane Taliyahs, it's going to be with Ahri a lot of the time, like Huhi, because she does have, like, really nice harassment in lane for Ahri, like Pawn. So, you know, you can probably still do Electrocute and it'll be fine, but the reason that they take Electrocute in the jungle is because there is no laning phase. Like, you're not sitting there doing light trades with the enemy early on, versus Ahri for a mage like that would be used primarily just to get extra poke in lane. So if you're harassing like a melee champion, you can take Ahri, but Electrocute's probably still fine too. She doesn't have a way to trigger sudden impact very easily, so that's why I kind of hesitate on Electrocute, but you can still take Taste of Blood, I guess, and heal a little bit. You can use Ulti Hunter, get your wall up more often, so it's probably fine with Electrocute. But I think laning phase, a lot of people still go Ahri, Mana Flow, Celerity Scorch, and then Dematerializer, Time Warp. And then you're just going to go, you know, Ludens, Rylai, Morello, gives you some nice utility, good slow, you know, all the mana that you need. And the extra healing reduction. So, I think Taliyah's still pretty good. I would probably prefer Twisted Fate right now after the nerfs, as far as, like, mid lane goes, but I still think that Taliyah is still strong. Okay, Swain. Now, Swain's not going to have... Swain has received several nerfs. He's been really overpowered for a while. And he's not going to have the most eye-popping... you know, win rates right now. I didn't even see where he was. Oh, here we go. It's like 51%. I'm really shocked that people aren't playing him more than 2.7%. There must have been a lot of, like, YouTubers out there that said that he's all washed up and he's no good. I'm here to tell you he's still very, very good. I've seen him several times. He has great CC in lane, you know, with his little never move, and then he can pull people back in. He's very tanky, which is great against assassins. Once he completes that rod and has his ult, it's very difficult to assassinate him. And he puts out some really high damage, too, with, like, that Q spam. Once he gets that Q to level 5, you know, once he gets level 9 and puts 5 points in Q, he just does a ton of damage. So I think he's just a very good control mage. He's just very difficult to deal with. Like, he's tanky, he puts out a lot of damage, he has sustain, pretty good itemization. He's great. So I think that a lot of people have kind of been sleeping on him lately in the mid lane. Maybe it's because people are playing him bot lane a little bit more, but he's okay in the bot lane, but I still think he's great in the mid lane. And people these days are going for Phase Rush, Nimbus, so whenever you ult, it's going to give you, you know, a lot more movement speed to help you get to that backline easier. And then Celerity, when you're getting all this extra movement speed, you're going to get a lot of extra AP. And then just Biscuit Time Warp for maximum oppression early on. So yeah, I think that he's just strong. And then just your standard Rod of the Ages, Zhonya's, and Morello. And it's off to the races. So I think that Swain's great, especially like if you don't really have a tank on your team, or you've kind of got like a little half tank or something. You know, maybe you've got top lane Aurelia or like Kled or something like that. Something that's kind of durable, but not like super durable. And you've got like a jungle Kindred or whatever. You know, if you just need someone who's a bit tankier, I think he's probably the best durable champion right now. Swain or Vlad's another one who's useful, but I really prefer Swain a lot more just because he has crowd control, and crowd control is just great. So, Vlad and Swain are similar, but I would prefer Swain a lot more than Vlad just because of his... I think he's a bit more reliable than Vlad is. Although Vlad is decent as well. Okay, so another one, Ahri. Now, Ahri's kind of a newcomer. Ahri's always been, like, a decent champ. You know, she's never, like, completely terrible. Just because she's very safe. You know, you basically have 3 flashes every minute or so. Are we out of internet connection? I mean, I guess that's fine if we are, just because... you know, I'm recording this on OBS. Oh. Yeah, it doesn't seem good. Hopefully that comes back in a second. I don't know. Like, it doesn't say that we're out here. Is the other stuff working? Let me see. Okay. I don't know. That's weird. I don't know why that Google Doc's not working for Ahri. Okay, there it goes. I don't know. Anyways. So a couple of recent buffs to Ahri brought her into the limelight. The big one is her E, her charm now. I think it's the E. Yeah. Level 1 does 1.4 seconds. It used to only be 1 second, and this is the thing that you max last. So now it gets an extra, like, half a second CC, which is a really big deal. That guarantees that even if they have Mercury Treads, you're still going to hit them with a full orb and a full Foxfire rotation. So, you know, her numbers aren't insane. Like, 224 on Foxfire plus 48%, and then... You know, the orb, 280 with a 0.7 is pretty nice if you get that full combo on him. But the fact that you can trigger Electrocute really well, you can trigger the lethality really well, and you can really abuse the celerity plus Nimbus Cloak because you're able to cast your ult 3 times. I think each one of those might... I think Nimbus Cloak... Does Nimbus Cloak go on cooldown? I assume Nimbus probably goes on cooldown for a certain length of time, but I can't remember. Yeah, cooldown 60 seconds. Okay, so you can't, like, refresh it indefinitely just about every time you cast it. But still, it's going to give you 100 bonus movement speed, which is equal to 16 AP, I believe, off of celerity. So, that's a decent little chunk of AP. But basically, the big thing is, like, she's pretty safe, has good wave clear, she can roam fairly well. It's very hard to gank, and she can reposition to run people down, to dodge skill shots. And her ultimate does pretty respectable damage as well. Yeah, maximum single target damage of 360 with a 105%. And you do an extra 20% bonus damage if you hit them with Charm. So that's quite a bit of bonus damage on top of these things. So her numbers get pretty high for an assassin. So if they don't have any point-click lockdown CC, then you can dodge a lot of their stuff, and you can reposition and do quite a bit of damage, and it's on a low cooldown. So, you know, if they're not running like Ryze, Malzahar, Lissandra, or just something with like a point-click snare, then you have a lot of outplay potential with her. So she's very safe. But she's also pretty high skill cap and can go really aggressive and try to get a charm on someone on the back line and kill him if you want to. So it's kind of like an old school, not quite the same as Zoe, but like in the way that Zoe gets to use her R to fish for bubbles, then, you know, she can do this to try to fish for charms, although it's on a much longer cooldown. So I think she's okay. She's not going to do like the most mind-blowing, you know, damage, but... she is pretty strong, particularly if there's no CC on the enemy team. Now, she does, like I said, she is weak to things like Malzahar, Fiddlesticks, potentially someone like Rakan. You know, you gotta be careful with her because there is a lot of CC running around out there. But overall, good champ, reliable, has a high win rate right now. Where is she? Yeah, rocking like a 54% win rate and a pretty high pick rate. So yeah, definitely a very strong champ right now. Very respectable. Let's have her a little bit lower. Once again, just because I don't think that she scales quite as hard as some of these other champs or doesn't roam quite as hard as some of these other champs. But she is easier to play and she's very forgiving and very, very safe. So there's a lot to be said for that. All right, Quinn. I've talked about Quinn in other roles. She's not picked very often in the mid lane, but she does win a lot. She's got 55% win rate. Very similar to a lot of the other champs. Now, she doesn't. Her wave clear is not as good as something like a Twisted Fate or an Aurelian Soul, but her speed and like the availability of like her bird is always up. Like you can always roam around with it, especially if you have blue buff. You can roam around and pick people off a lot. So a little bit less on the wave clear, but extremely high single target damage, especially after she gets Dustblade, and like really high uptime on her roaming. So she can definitely be a menace. I mean, her Q does decent wave clear, especially on the back line. And she does really nice sustain damage too. So because she's, you know, like an AD carry, she takes towers quickly, she can take Baron quickly. So she does have that kind of utility. And that's something that some of the other champs lack at least a little bit that are on the list. So I think she's kind of a unique pick. She's interesting if you want to run like, you know, double AD carry. So if you have a lot of bruisers and tanks on your team, then she could be a decent option. I would not recommend running her if you have like a Kindred in the jungle, like a top lane Kennen or, you know, something like that, you know. But if you don't have any other range champs, if it's just your AD carry bottom and you want to run another one mid lane and you've got a bunch of bruisers and tanks with a lot of CC running around, she's a pretty good option. Okay. LeBlanc is really, really good if you're really good on LeBlanc. And I think she's starting to make a bit of a comeback. They recently did revert the change, which makes her a lot easier to play and makes her all-in potential much higher. She just has crazy ratios. I mean, 310 total damage on Sigil of Malice with a 0.8 ratio. And, you know, if it's overcast, it's going to be 420 with a 0.8. Pretty high uptime, only a 1 minute cooldown on her ult. So, very good with Electrocute, very good with Sudden Impact, good with Ulti Hunter. And then if you need to, she can do something like Time Warp Tonic as a secondary to get through a laning phase. So, if you're really good on her, I think she's excellent. She's one of the few, like, hardcore assassins that you might see in pro play. I don't think she saw a ton of play. But she's getting back up there. I mean, recently, this patch... she's seeing some play, right? Now, once again, pro play is not the same as solo queue, but if you start to see her making a resurrection in pro play, it means she's really good. So she's one of the few assassins because she's so safe. And she has such a huge range of influence because you can dash forward and then, you know, ult your dash again to dash a second time, hit them with your chains, blow them up, and then go back to where you originally were. So she has like a range of, you know, like 1,500 or something, right? Because your distortion range is 600. So you can distort twice. That's 1,200 range. Hit them with the chains. You know, it's like 2,000 range where you can go in to chain them. And if the chain lands, you know, while the chain's going, you just hit them with your Q, and then it's going to proc the second part of your Q and just auto attack them again. They're going to get electrocuted, boom, dead. And then you just zip back away another 2,000 units. It's like, it's ridiculous. Once again, if they don't have, it's kind of like Ahri, if they don't have lockdown CC, if it's not Ryze, if it's not Lissandra, Malzahar, something like that, then she's going to be able to go in there and fish for these hits, and if she doesn't get them, whatever, she's coming back here in another second, right? So she's very, very good. Now, her wave clear, I think, is still a little suspicious compared to some of the other mages. That's how they've tried to balance her, is to give her pretty bad wave clear. But you might be able to, distort and then overcast your distort to instantly clear a wave like you used to be able to do. But it does put your Mimic on a longer cooldown, so you can't do that every wave. So yeah, I think she's definitely legit. She is on the hard side to play. She's one of the harder mid laners to play because there's so many different like combinations you can do with her. And she is very fragile if people get a hold of her, or if you like jump into the wrong situation and get crowd controlled. But nevertheless, very strong. She is a decent champion to like try to one trick. The problem is she does get a lot of pro attention when she's good. People do actually play her in pro play, which means that often she gets nerfed. So that's kind of a feels bad. So, you know, one tricker at your own peril, but she is rotating back into favor right now, and she's going to be strong for a little bit. Okay, Orianna, the perennial safe pick. If this was just a pro tier list or a challenger tier list, Orianna would probably be tier 1. But she's just good in almost anything. She has pretty nice range. She has good protection with her E. Pretty reasonable scaling. Good damage. Good utility for your team. You can speed them up with the W. You can slow down enemies. You can protect other people with your, you know, ball against assassins. You can protect your AD carry. You can throw the ball on a tank who's initiating and like double up on that initiation. So, you know, just throw the ball on your Rakan that's about to go in and then just shockwave everybody and you win the fight. So she's just really, really like versatile and balanced. I don't think she's ever... I'll say it's not common for her to be in an overpowered state since she was released like in Season 3, but she's always like relevant. So she's just a good, solid control mage, especially when the trio of tank busters aren't around. So when you don't see a lot of Ryze, Cassiopeia, and Azir, she's going to be pretty good. Now, she's not going to have as much firepower as those champs a lot of time, especially against tanks, but she always has really good utility, and she can hold her own. Like, there's no matchup, I don't think, if you're a good Orianna player, that you're just flat out going to lose. So I think that she is overall just a really good, solid champ. If you do want to one-trick a champ, she can be good. The problem is she is a little bit more team reliant than some of the other ones. She doesn't snowball as hard. She doesn't have like the, you know, eye-popping ratios of someone like a Fizz or someone like, you know, a LeBlanc, the ability to delete. You know, she's not going to go like 15-1 in a game. She might sometimes, but she's really not going to one-shot people if her ult's not up. And even then, I think it only has like a 0.7 ratio. I know her W has a 0.7. So she just doesn't snowball as hard. She's not as hardcore, but she's good, safe, great utility, really awesome team fighter. She's just the perennial safe pick control mage for the mid lane. So I think she's good. I'm going to put her in tier 2 for people that are platinum and lower. But if you do want a one trick or you get really proficient on her, she definitely can be you know, a hard carry champ. And then you're just going to go your standard Luden, Death Cap. You don't want to get Void... Like, you can get Void Staff really late in the game, but a lot of her utility comes with, like, her shield. She can put on people with her E. And so on champions like that, or like a Lulu or a Karma or whatever, it's better just to get flat AP, like Death Cap, so that you have more power with your utility. Because the spell pin doesn't matter if you're using your shield on somebody with your E, right? Now, her shield did get nerfed recently with a lot of the other shields that got nerfed, so it only lasts for 2.5 seconds, but realistically, they're going to break through that shield before you reach that, because I'm pretty sure you level the shield last. Like, you level W first, or Q, depending on the matchup, and then the shield is last, so that shield's going to break before you... before the 2.5 seconds rolls around. It's okay right here. Yeah, just nice, like pretty good play rate, pretty good win rate. And you just go Ahri because you have a lot of, you know, really good harass in the lane. So you can muscle up on champions like Fizz, like Talon early on. Just put them pretty far behind. And then, you know, your ball will protect you for a little while. And if you have to, you could go something like Arm Guard early, or at least a cloth armor, and shut out people like Talon or Zed from being able to one-shot you. So, pretty good overall, all-around safe pick. Zed is an assassin that occasionally sees pro play, but it's pretty rare. I think that Leblanc is just better most of the time and overshadows him. But he can be pretty good. He kind of suffers from sort of Talon-itis in that if your team overloads on AD, you know, you're always going to have an AD carry, and if you have like an AD jungle or an AD top, then they might just overload on armor. So if you have like a Kindred jungle, it's really hard to pick Zed. Or if you have like a top lane Darius or Fiora or something. So because right now in this meta, AD is very popular both in the jungle and in the top lane, then it's really tough to pick champions like Talon and Zed. And I think Talon's just a better version of Zed right now. He's just a lot easier to play. I think his ratios are a lot higher. But Zed is very good. I mean, he's a great one-trick champion as well because he's very rarely so overpowered that he gets banned consistently and that people in pro play start playing him consistently. So I think he's a solid pick. Now, he does have pretty good mobility. He has good wave clear. Now, that's something that a lot of other assassins are missing. Talon has pretty good wave clear as well. But Zed does have a lot of outplay potential. Obviously, with his ult, with his Qs, and his different shadows. He's one of the more challenging champions in the game to play correctly. But it is fairly easy for him to get onto the back line, you know, do his full combo and assassinate some squishy and then get out unscathed. And then he can still do some pretty decent damage. And he's good at cleaning up people with his contempt for the weak. So if a lot of people are getting low, then he can clean people up even without his ult. So I think he's pretty legit. Hard to play. I think there are probably better choices a lot of the time. A little bit suspect in a meta that's dominated by AD in the jungle and the top lane. But overall, really solid. If you're good on him, you could definitely make him work. Okay, Kassadin is another one that hasn't seen a ton of play yet, but I would suspect to see him coming back. They did recently give him a few buffs. I don't remember precisely what they were. But in general, when AP assassins start to get good again, that's when Kassadin starts creeping back into the meta. So we haven't seen him in a while because his build is a bit slow. People were going Rod and Tier on him, I think, fairly recently. But a lot of people have dropped the Rod and they're just going Tier. So yeah, a lot of people are just doing Seraphs and then just Lich Bane Hourglass. And he has nice ratios. Like, his Q is like a 0.7, I think. His W is a 0.7. I think they made it to where his W actually costs like 1 mana, so you charge your tier faster, I think was one of the big things, so he can like spam that as he's running back to lane. And then his E has like a 0.7. It's like everything has a 0.7. Pretty much ratio, so it's got pretty good damage. The reason he's so good against mages is every time he hits somebody with his Q, he gets a shield against magic. So when he goes into trade with his Q, like his R and then Q on somebody, then he gets a lot of extra damage mitigation. And once he starts snowballing, he's very, very good. Once he gets a couple of items, it's just, can he make it through the laning phase? And I think especially if you're going for the Corrupting Potion start with Time Warp Tonic and Biscuits, I feel like you definitely can make it through the early game with him, which historically has been a problem. So if they do nerf Electrocute and Sudden Impact, I think that might actually be pretty good for him. That is currently what he gets, I think, most of the time. But anything that really stops a lot of the early game harassment will be good for him in the long run. As you can see, people don't really agree on the builds that well. Now, he's not very represented either. There's not many people that play him. A lot of people do like the Electrocute, but there are a variety of other options that can be decent on him. So I think you might see him show up as a counter pick specifically to Fizz. You see Fizz is showing up a lot here. Now, this is Shifter and High that are specifically picking him into Fizz, but he does have a really high win rate against Fizz. So if we start seeing Fizz a lot more, like he's good into Fizz, he's good into LeBlanc. I wouldn't blind pick him, but if you are getting, if you're getting to counter them, then I think he's a pretty good option. And then finally, we have Ryze. Now, if this was pro meta, once again, Ryze would be tier 1. He is starting to creep back into the meta, and now that they are nerfing out a lot of the other damage champs and tanks are starting to come back a little bit, Ryze is sort of the premier tank breaker that's left. Cassiopeia is getting some decent win rates, too. Cassio's up to 52%, and she's very hard to play. So if Cassio's far over 50%, then she's really strong. So I think Cassio is underrated. They did buff her Q recently. I didn't quite squeeze her on here. I put Ryze on there because I think Ryze is just a little bit easier to play than Cassio. They're both very difficult to play. But Ryze also has a point-click W, which is really nice to help against mobility. So when you have like Ahri's running around or Zoe's or whatever trying to run around, then being able to have that point-click lockdown is really nice with Ryze. Whereas if the tanks start coming back who don't have as much mobility, you know, like the Sejuanis, the Orns, the Malachis and stuff like that, then I think Cassiopeia, if you're just standing there just free firing on people, then Cassiopeia can probably throw out more damage. Although Ryze puts out quite a bit too. It's tough to say, but ultimately I gave Ryze the spot over Cassio just because he is actually getting represented in pro play quite a bit recently, and we're not even like back into a super tank meta yet, but it still is kind of a tank meta in the pro scene. There are a lot of tanks that are getting picked in a lot of different roles. Why are we... What are we... Pro build, picks of the way. Okay, there we go. Oh, it just started this week. Is that what it is? Just game version 0.14. I don't know why this is... Anyways, Ryze is seeing a bit more play. I guess it just reset like in the middle of this video because I know I just looked at it earlier. I guess it just updated in the middle of this video. But he is seeing a lot more play, and he has been pretty decent, and he does have that point click to lock down people that run around. Now, he is extremely hard to play, or at least to sort of understand his different combos and what you should be doing. So you do need to put a lot of practice in him. He is in the crosshairs of pro play a lot, so it's difficult for me to recommend that you should one-trick him because he's so mercurial. Like, sometimes he's so OP that he's always picked or banned, and other times he's completely worthless. It's very rare that he's like, he's an okay under-the-radar pick. That never happens. If he's good, pro players always play him. So I think that he is really strong right now, and if tanks come back a little bit more on the next patch, especially if things like Electrocute and Sudden Impact get nerfed, which are likely, then he's going to be really good because he doesn't use those. He uses Phase Rush, Mana Flow, Celerity, Scorch, Biscuit, and Time Warp. He does require time to stack up, so, you know, typically you'll go Tier, and then Morello, Hourglass. If the meta slows down enough, he really likes to go Rod as well, historically at least, so he can go Seraphs plus Rod. But he doesn't have to have that. He can just be a bit squishier and go Morello plus Hourglass. But yeah, he is a menace. He's very good. He's got that point-click lockdown. Very good at tearing through tanks. He does have really good roaming with his ult. They did nerf the cooldown on it, so you can't do it as often. And they did nerf his wave clear a little bit, but he's still a very good clear, push, roam, very high sustained damage, very good scaling, very good at breaking tanks. He's just great. So if you do want to learn him, you know, he's going to be pretty strong, probably for the rest of the year. They might nerf him a little bit, but I still think he's going to be great. Okay, well, I guess the internet's goofing up again, but whatever. We got it done. We don't need the internet for the video. It just records on my computer itself. So we are finished here. Now, a couple of other honorable mentions, and we'll be done in about an hour here. Katarina is okay. You know, you can hard snowball with her, but she has an atrocious laning phase, and she has no CC, so I'd rather just play some of these other assassins. Although she's probably the best reset assassin. She's the best, like, pentakill, go in there, clean everybody up assassin. But I think that other champs can do that pretty well, too. Like, Ekko can clean up pretty well. Zed can clean up. Kassadin can clean up. So I feel like there are probably better options. Now, Lissandra is someone that I haven't seen a lot of, but I'm starting to, like, see a little bit more because she has really nice initiate. They just need to, if they buff her a little bit, I think they're going to rework her passive sometime soon. That's the word on the street. But if they just give her a little bit more initiate, a little bit lower cooldowns, a little bit lower mana cost, I think she could be really good. She has a great kit. So I think we're starting to see, especially because after Malzahar got nerfed really hard, you can cleanse a Lissandra ult. So it's not as good as the suppression, but she also doesn't have to stand still and channel it like Malzahar does. So, and she can use it to protect herself to heal against assassins. So she's very versatile. You know, you can use it to initiate, especially with Hourglass, and just cause a lot of chaos in a team fight. You can use it to pick people off, and you can use it to protect yourself against assassins. So I think it's pretty versatile. It's just mana costs a little bit high, damage is not quite high enough, but I think that she definitely has some potential in certain matchups, especially if she gets any buffs at all. We could definitely see her in the future. Anivia is someone that can be strong She has a lot of damage, very, very good wave clear. It's just she's really slow. It's hard to rotate to keep up with some of these other champions that are running to the side lanes, especially with the teleport nerf. That hampers her mobility quite a bit. But into certain matchups, she can still be really strong. Cassiopeia, already mentioned her. Should get a buff on her Q. She does do quite a bit of damage, but she takes a while to take off. She has to have tier plus rod. She's very slow. You know, she can't even get boots early on. So she requires a lot of levels and a lot of scaling. But if tanks come back, like mega tanks that are really hard for anybody to kill, Cassiopeia is going to be your girl for that. Karthus. He's pretty good. You know, farms pretty well, has decent push. He has nice global pressure with his ult. I think they nerfed his ult where it's even a longer cooldown now. I can't remember precisely, but there are a lot more tools in the game to deal with a Karthus ult than there used to be. Primarily Stopwatch is very good against Karthus ult, as is Hourglass, which is extremely popular on a lot of champions. You know, Hex Drinker is really strong right now. You've got Sterex to contend with. Enchanter supports are coming back a little bit, so you got to deal with their heals plus Locket plus Redemption. So I think there are a lot of answers to Karthus ult right now in the meta. So he can be really good, especially if you snowball really hard, but I feel like there are other options. And then some champions just have ways to dodge it. Like Fizz can pop up on his little pole and dodge it. You know, Ekko can heal himself with his ult. There's just a lot of ways to interact with Karthus ult than there have been in the past. Okay, Akali, I think she's pretty much trash right now unless you're really, really good on her. She's going to have a really low win rate, and I predicted this for the first, you know, patch or so, for the first couple of weeks. She's very difficult to play. She has no CC. She requires a lot of gold to snowball. So, can she be good? Sure. Will she be good? No. Not for the next couple of patches. And I don't even know after that. We'll see. I mean, she strikes me as a Riven-esque type of champion. I don't know. Pyke was pretty bad right out the gates, too. And then eventually people came over and went, oh my god, Nunu's like 28%. But that's mid lane Nunu, I guess. But yeah, she's just hovering about 41%. So, she's really, really rough. I would not touch Akali. I know some people have her as like tier 1. No. Absolutely not. Maybe. I mean, like, in a month we can talk. But, like, as of right now, I don't see it happening. She's just too difficult to play, and her numbers just aren't big enough to justify. You know, if you want to play something that's hard to play that actually will give you a lot of return, you need to be playing, like, something like Leblanc or Ryze or something like that. It's just a way better, you know, way better way for you to get your kicks, to get your challenge, and to actually keep getting some wins, if that's what you're after. Vlad's pretty good. You know, he is durable. He's difficult to assassinate. He does have some nice sustain in lane. My problem with Vlad is he doesn't have any crowd control. So it's very difficult to gank and get him snowballing and rolling early on. Especially a lot of the junglers don't have crowd control either. A lot of popular junglers like Graves, Kindred, things like that have very, very limited crowd control. So I just think there are better options, especially after the nerf to Aurelia a few patches ago. I just think that something like Swain, if you just want someone who's really durable, it's a nice control mage, heals himself and all that stuff. I feel like Swain's just a better version of Vlad right now. Yasuo can work mid lane. The crit buffs definitely help him a little bit, but I think he's very vulnerable to getting ganked, and I think that you can just get destroyed. If you get ganked and you fall behind as Yasuo, you're just going to get blown up. His wave clear is also a little suspicious. It's okay. Now, if you just get to sit there and do your thing and they don't gank you, yeah, he can be pretty good, especially against ranged champions. But if you get ganked, I think it's just going to be lights out. So, we'll see. If you're very good on Yasuo, you can make it work. But I feel like a lot of people are not good enough on Yasuo to make it work. What's his win rate in mid? I think he's, if you want to play him, I think he's best top lane. Yeah, it's only 48%. So win rate's not everything. But like Ryze is 45%. But I just don't think he's worth it with the payoff. Morgana is okay. There are a lot of mages kind of like this, where it's like if you hit the skill shot, they're dead, but it's just a lot of ways to play around her. Like, Morgana, Lux kind of falls into this category too. Maybe Brand. I just feel like if you don't have mobility, if you can't really dash or blink or flash, like, you just can't be in mid lane unless there's like you do a lot of sustained damage or you bring a lot of stuff to the table. Like, Ryze doesn't have that stuff, but he just brings so much damage and utility. Like, Orianna, I don't know. I just don't think that... I'm not a big proponent of Morgana middle. She's okay, but I just want a lot more power. I think mid lane needs to be a power play right now, especially with enchanters at the support role. A lot of times you really need to just have that raw power in the mid lane. So I really don't like utility mages like Morgana, Lulu, Karma, stuff like that. I just don't think it's the meta for that right now. And Xerath is probably... Morgana is probably the best control, like, support type of champion mid lane of the Karma Lulu bunch, but still a little suspect. And then finally, I think Xerath is... If you're going to play a poke champion, Xerath's probably the best. You need to be extremely good on Xerath, though. You need to hit everything if you're going to play him. Like, he does have a decent win rate. And that can be an answer to other control mages. So if you're against something like a Zoe or an Orianna, something like that, then Xerath is a very nice counterpick to them because he outranges them. And they're not going to be able to get close enough to deal with him. Maybe even Ryze. But it's very difficult to pick Xerath into something like Fizz or Talon, Zed, things like that. It's going to be a tough time. So if you do pick Xerath, you need to be like extremely good on him, or you need to use him as a counter pick against control mages. So anyways, that's going to be it. Thank you all very much. Hopefully you enjoyed this. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Be sure to check out the other tier list, the support and the AD carry tier list I came up with a few days ago. I'll probably do a jungle and a top lane tier list over the next few days. I'm also going to do a PvE preview where I talk about a lot of the stuff that might be coming out on the next patch. I'll probably do that Wednesday, so stay tuned for that. And come check out the live stream sometime. We have an awesome community. It's really friendly. I'll try to answer as many questions as I can, and sometimes I tell some old man stories. We have a good time on it. And we have just a really cool, friendly bunch that comes out every now and then. So it's a lot different than other streams in the sense, I think, that it's actually a community of regulars that recognize each other every night and have conversations and joke around and just kind of unwind after work and have a good time. So thank you very much. Have a good day, and I'll see you next time.